Such a beautiful day to be in New York.
All right, we finally got some sunshine.
Thanks for being with us. You know, we've all just been polishing Skip Adele's car.
Yeah, I'm gonna polish the car with this. This is all I got.
And
This little trick
his
he
cherub
did.
cheeks.
Can I clean it
I'm
with
going to bring
Poochie?
my car and rags and see if I can get them to clean
All right,
it.
go to foxandfriends.com.
Have a
And
great
skipfidel.com.
Sunday, everybody. We'll see you
Great
next
Sunday.
weekend.
I couldn't even look her in the eye.
Good Sunday morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. New controversy surrounding James Comey after his private memos about meetings with President Trump go public. Another California county joins the Trump administration in the legal battle over the Golden State's immigration laws. And celebrating a life well lived, President George W. Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush reflect on the passing of Barbara Bush as they sit down with me. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Welcome to Sunday Morning Futures. Key lawmakers say that Jim Comey's memos about his conversations with President Trump prove he was politically biased, while the Inspector General recommends criminal charges against Comey's ex-deputy, Andrew McCabe. This as we await the IG's next report on the Clinton email investigation. Reaction on all of that from the House Intelligence Committee Chairman, Devin Nunes, coming up. A revolt is underway in the Golden State, San Diego, the very latest county to back the Trump administration's lawsuit, which challenges California's sanctuary state laws. We speak with one leader from that county who says enough is enough. And remembering a woman of grace and grit, we will highlight the extraordinary life and legacy of Barbara Bush in my exclusive interview with President George W. Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush as we look ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures. President Trump taking Jim Comey to task over newly released memos the former FBI director kept to document his conversations with the president. The Justice Department's Inspector General is now investigating if Comey mishandled classified information by giving some of those documents to a friend who then shared them with a reporter. The president calling that move illegal and saying it raises questions about the Mueller-Russia investigation. Meanwhile, 3 GOP committee chairmen out with a scathing statement on the Comey memos, accusing him of political bias in his interactions with the Obama-era officials versus President Trump. I'm joined right now by one of those lawmakers. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes is live this morning at the World Ag Expo in California, and Congressman Nunes is also a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
I want to get to that memo, the letter that you have written after the Jim Comey memos were out. But first, let me start here. Let's pick up where we left off the last time we spoke, Mr. Chairman. You joined us 4 weeks ago on this program. At that time, you said you wanted to get the electronic communication from the Department of Justice and the FBI. You wanted that electronic communications to understand exactly how the Trump investigation into collusion even began. You've now since seen the electronic communication, yes?
That's correct. So it took us a long time to actually get this, what's called the electronic communication. As we know it now for your viewers, what that is it's the original intelligence, the original reasons that the counterintelligence investigation was started. Now, this is really important to us because a counterintelligence investigation uses the tools of our intelligence services that are not supposed to be used on American citizens. So we've long wanted to know, well, what intelligence did you have that actually led to this investigation? So what we found now, after the investigators have reviewed it, is that, in fact, there was no intelligence. So we have a traditional partnership with what's called the Five Eyes Agreement. Five Eyes Agreement involves our friends in Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Canada, and of course us. So long time process and procedures in place where we move intelligence across. We are not supposed to spy on each other's citizens, and it's worked well, and it continues to work well. And we know it's working well because there was no intelligence that passed from Five Eyes through the Five Eyes channels to our government. And that's why we had to see that original communication. So now we're trying to figure out, as you know, We are investigating the State Department. We think there's some major irregularities at the State Department, and we're trying to figure out how it is that this information about Mr. Papadopoulos, of all people, who was supposedly meeting with some folks in London, how that made it over across into the FBI's hands. We know a little bit about that because of what some of the State Department officials themselves have said about that. So we were glad to get this behind us, but now, of course, as we peel another piece back, it leaves more unanswered questions, which we're trying to get to the bottom of.
Mr. Chairman, you've got to explain what you just said. I think this is extraordinary, that you're telling us that in order for the FBI, the Department of Justice, to launch an investigation into so-called collusion between President Trump and the Russians, there was no official intelligence used. Then how did this investigation start? I don't understand, sir. Please explain.
Well, I think that is the point. We don't understand. We've never understood because, you know, we have access to these finished intelligence products, and we've never seen one. So we thought, well, maybe there was one that went through a different channel that was kept really quiet, that was secret, that was kept from the Congress and other folks. Well, in fact, after our investigators reviewed this, that is not what happened. There was no Five Eyes intelligence product as it's been reported. There was no product, and I think that's a major problem because we have to have trust with our partners, with our allies. We have to make sure that our agencies talk and they work out problems. We have to make sure that they don't spy on either American citizens or that we're not spying on British citizens. These are all things that have been around for decades. So, and this is even more critical. Let's just at the highest level, what is this? What is this about? This was about a counterintelligence investigation that was at the height of a political campaign, where you opened up an investigation using these intelligence services to spy on the other campaign. It's really serious stuff.
It's quite extraordinary. So you're investigating the State Department. Does that mean it was Hillary Clinton pulling the strings? I mean, here you have Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State. She's the other candidate. Is she pulling the strings on an investigation launched on her opponent, her political opponent, Donald Trump?
Well, we don't know that yet, but what I can tell you what we do know. We do know that longtime associates of Hillary Clinton, including Sidney Blumenthal and another person named, I think, Corey Scheer, were actively giving information to the State Department that was somehow making its way to the FBI. This is from two people within the State Department who have now publicly come out and said this I think in major news publications. So we know this. We know this was at least two witnesses who have publicly said this. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to piece all that together. We now know that there was no official intelligence that was used to start this investigation. We know that Sidney Blumenthal and others were pushing information into the State Department. So we're trying to piece all of that together, and that's why we continued to look at the State Department.
We are awaiting the IG report as it relates to Jim Comey, as it relates to the handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. We got these Comey memos this week. Tell me what you got from these memos. What struck you most?
Well, the main reason we wanted them out is because the mainstream media and the Democrats have been running around talking about collusion. When they figured out there was no collusion, they moved on to obstruction of justice. What Mr. Gowdy, who was able to review these a long time ago, and Mr. Goodlatte had said, and now we know this from reading them, is that once you read all of the Comey memos, it becomes Exhibit A in a defense against that there was no obstruction of justice. So I think when you read all of them, good legal minds review these. When you have the President of the United States saying, look, investigate all of my people. If anybody in my campaign was colluding with the Russians, I want to know, and they need to be brought to justice. Something of that nature is in the Comey memos. So this is why the Comey memos needed to get out, because, you know, if there is obstruction of justice, we want to know about it. But clearly there wasn't, and that's what the Comey memos prove. Now, I think for Mr. Comey, when you match up his memos with what's in his book, with the interviews that he's giving, I think he's got a lot of problems coming in the future as it relates to what the IG is looking at into his behavior during the Clinton email investigation.
Well, what kind of problems? I mean, we know that the IG has recommended criminal charges against his former deputy, Andrew McCabe. Where does that go? What does that mean, criminal charges? Where do you see that going? And is that the same fate that we will see for Jim Comey?
Well, it's hard to say right now, but we know that. So Mr. McCabe has been recommended that he face criminal charges. Now his lawyer, and he has a right to his lawyer. His lawyer has said no, this is not true. What the IG, Mr. Comey, is lying. Essentially, is what Mr. McCabe is saying, that Comey did give him the right to go talk to the press. So you know, this all has to be fleshed out. Clearly, the IG. Doesn't believe, the IG believed Mr. Comey, that Comey did not give Mr. McCabe the ability to go talk to the press. Now, as it relates to Mr. Comey, you've got the added problem now that the memos that he wrote, the 7 memos that he decided to write on President Trump, never wrote memos on any of the other meetings he had with the other president or the AG or anyone else prior to this, but he kept 7 memos. 4 of those were classified. He decided to launder them to a friend who then leaked them to the New York Times. If those memos contain classified information, he purposely did that. He purposely leaked them in order to get a special counsel started after he was fired. He leaked pieces of these, so we need to figure out exactly what is it that he leaked. Who did he give these memos to? And was it just the friend that leaked them to the New York Times, or were there others? I believe there were others. I think that these Comey memos were actually given to several people. It contained classified information. The irony is the very thing that Mr. Comey cleared Mrs. Clinton of.
Real quick, we're going to take a break right here, but with all of what you're saying, whether it's no official intelligence, the president pushing to find out the truth, no obstruction of justice, are these reasons to shut down this Robert Mueller special counsel probe?
Well, look, I in the beginning, I actually supported special counsel because I thought, okay, Mr. Mueller will come in, longtime FBI guy. He will quickly see that there's no evidence of collusion, which there was, because we had not seen any. Just like I said, we've not seen any intelligence product that shows that there was any collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Right. But that he would quickly go after the felony that occurred when General Flynn was talking to the Russian ambassador, and all of that information was leaked out, which is a major felony at the highest level. So I thought, great, we'll have a special counsel. They'll close those leaks. We'll figure out who that was. Well, that never happened. It appears like this was clearly what started as a counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign. They drilled a bunch of dry holes, never found any collusion. They moved to obstruction. They got a special counsel, and now God knows where this is going to go. Right. But I think the American people are getting sick and tired of it.
Well, they did manage to raid Michael Cohen's office and home and hotel room, let's not forget. Chairman Nunes, stay with us. We've got more to talk about, and I want to get your reaction to this next story. The same people who helped fund that salacious and unverified Trump dossier now have some new targets in their sights. The Democratic National Committee filing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the Trump campaign, against Russia, WikiLeaks, and others. They're alleging there was a conspiracy to keep Hillary Clinton from winning the election. Yes, that's what they're charging. Follow me on Twitter, at Maria Bartiromo, at Sunday Futures. Let us know what you'd like to hear. Devin Nunes continues when we come right back. The Democratic National Committee filing a lawsuit on Friday against the Trump campaign, Russia, and WikiLeaks, alleging conspiracy to undercut Democrats in the 2016 presidential election by stealing tens of thousands of emails and documents. We're back with Congressman Devin Nunes, chairman of the House Intel Committee. And Mr. Chairman, your thoughts, your reaction to this lawsuit?
Well, my first thought is that it's this some kind of joke. This must be a joke. I mean, we know who colluded with Russians. They don't want to admit that they colluded with Russians, But they hired they hired a law firm that hired Fusion GPS, that hired a British spy that went and colluded with Russians. So I don't understand why they just didn't open up a lawsuit against themselves. They should name themselves and sue themselves so that they can get to the bottom of what do they have on their servers. Why didn't they give those servers to the FBI? This is nothing more, nothing less than a continuation of fundraising off of this scandal. This is made to play to the far left in this country so that the far left will continue to write checks because they don't believe that President Trump won the election fair and square.
Yeah.
Because the media, most of the media in this country has continued this narrative that there was collusion, there was obstruction, that Trump was somehow involved with Putin and Putin helped to steal this election. We've now looked at all this. None of that is true, but the Democrats need a way to keep their base motivated to turn out in November, and they need a way to continue to raise money. And they're raising millions and millions and millions of dollars to target Republicans over this Russia fiasco.
It's incredible.
But yet
okay,
there's the only place where there's a Russia fiasco is with them.
So this is a fundraising exercise. Why doesn't the RNC come back and say, we're suing you for the same exact reason, given the fact that we know the bias at the top of the FBI, we know that there have already been felonies, we know about the leaking and the fact that the FBI, the DOJ, and perhaps the CIA were all in it to try to get Hillary to win and keep Donald Trump from winning. I mean, it's the same thing. Once again, they're pushing on you what they're doing. Isn't that right?
That's right. Well, I always like to say whatever the left accuses you of doing, they're doing themselves.
By the way, what about those servers?
That's exactly what you have here.
Mr. Chairman, what about those servers? I mean, remember when
I don't know about the servers. I don't know. I mean,
when the Democratic National Committee got hacked, you would think that the DNC wants the might and the power and the strength of the U.S. government behind them to find out who hacked, how come all these emails are out in the public's view, and yet they didn't do that at all. They didn't give the server to the FBI. They hired a private company to look at their servers.
Exactly. So the obvious question here is that, you know, once you were notified by the FBI that maybe somebody had hacked into your system, for sure, once those emails became public, right, and they came public, I think mid-July, you think you would immediately call the FBI in to try to figure out and get to the bottom of what had happened.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. There must be a reason why they didn't want the FBI to come in.
Yeah.
I think we probably know the reason why. There was probably a lot of bad things that were on that system.
Real quick, Mr. Chairman, let me switch gears. Tomorrow we've got the vote from the Senate committee on Mr. Pompeo in terms of becoming the new Secretary of State. Your thoughts on what we'll see tomorrow out of this vote for Mr. Pompeo?
Well, Mr. Pompeo should have been confirmed weeks ago. This is really the number 3 person in our government. We have high-level negotiations going on with the North Koreans now and South Koreans trying to solve that long-standing conflict. Mr. Pompeo was already confirmed as the director of the FBI. He's a good man. He knows what he's doing. The president trusts him. This is about our nation's national security, and the United States Senate should stop playing politics with our national security. So a president has a right to hire whoever he wants, especially as it relates to someone with national security.
Right.
We should not let domestic politics get involved in this decision, and the Senate should do its job and do it quickly.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens tomorrow then. Mr. Chairman, good to see you, sir. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
We will be watching the developments. Devin Nunes there. A growing number of communities in California, meanwhile, siding with the Trump administration against the state's sanctuary laws. My next guest comes from the second most populous county. His thanks to San Diego County after the Board of Supervisors voted to support the federal lawsuit against California's sanctuary policies. The 3-1 vote last week is rejecting a state law that limits local police collaboration with federal immigration officials. Joining me right now is the chairman of that board, Kristen Gaspar. Kristen, good to see you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Why are you pushing back?
Oh, boy, we have a governor who's rolling out the welcome mat for MS-13 gang members in the state of California. We have a governor who consistently lets criminals walk out on our streets and pardons others. It's all packaged in the interest of neighborhood and school safety. But in San Diego, we're saying enough is enough to Governor Brown and his unsafe policies, including SB 54.
So what has been the impact of these open door policies? I mean, I'm scratching my head. I don't understand what the pushback to federal law really is. Any country wants to have borders, and immigration, legal immigration, should be front and center as opposed to illegal immigration. So I don't understand why the pushback, and tell us what the impact of it has been, these open borders, from your standpoint.
Sure, we're left in San Diego wondering, where has all the common sense gone? Since January alone, we're talking about 284 criminals now walking our streets. In the state of California, since this policy was passed, 142 gang members released back into sanctuary states. California took the brunt of it, with nearly 90 criminal gang members released back into California. These are the numbers. People need to understand the facts. This is 1 to 3 people released each and every day in San Diego, not tracked at all, just back out into our community.
So you think this is really ideologies, this resist movement? This has nothing to do with common sense. This is just, let's push back on anything that President Trump says or does.
If people have an interest in public safety, I don't know how you argue it. It's important to know that you hear a lot about, well, we can't have people who are in our country illegally not reporting crimes, being fearful of contacting our deputies. It's important to understand this was never the case. When our deputies went out and responded to calls by law enforcement, they were never even asking about citizenship status. So this argument does not hold up at all.
So where does this go now, do you think? I mean, you're pushing back. There are a lot of people, including your governor, who says, no, we are not going to tell law enforcement when we know illegals are here and when ICE is out after them. So where do you think this goes from here?
Well, there's a movement, and you can see it up and down the state of California, and it's really important because each and every community needs to tell the narrative of the direct impacts of SB 54. And the next steps are in the hands of the courts, but we can file briefs. We can share that narrative, and our briefs that we're filing with the courts tell our individual stories in our communities, so it's incredibly important that this movement continue.
All right, we'll be watching. Kristen, great to have you on the program. Thanks very much for weighing in this morning. We certainly will be watching your county. 11 congressional Republicans are demanding Attorney General Jeff Sessions open criminal investigations into Jim Comey, Hillary Clinton, and others. One of those lawmakers, House Judiciary Committee member Ron DeSantis, joins me next about his expectations. We're looking ahead this Sunday morning on Sunday Morning Futures. Back in a moment. Welcome back. 11 Republican lawmakers writing a letter to Attorney General Jeff Sessions requesting an investigation of Hillary Clinton, along with some former FBI and Justice Department officials. The congressional leaders are claiming potential violations on a range of topics, including the handling of the Clinton email probe, the funding for the anti-Trump dossier, and the Uranium One controversy. I'm joined right now by one of those lawmakers behind the letter to Sessions. Congressman Ron DeSantis is a member of the House Foreign Affairs, as well as Oversight and Judiciary Committees. He's also a member of the House Subcommittee on National Security. And Congressman, it's good to have you on the program this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Tell me why you wrote the letter.
Well, look, we have a special counsel going on looking into Trump campaign collusion. There's been no evidence of that, but yet in the course of us conducting oversight, we've had a lot of evidence that statutes have been violated. Andrew McCabe, for example, I was pleased that after we referred McCabe, that the Inspector General the next day followed through and formally referred him for lying to the FBI. You look at somebody like Jim Comey, he testified before us in Congress that he did not decide to exonerate Hillary till after her interview, and yet subsequent efforts of oversight unearthed the memo that he wrote 2 months before he interviewed Hillary. That was an exoneration memo. And then I think with this Michael Cohen raid, supposedly about the FEC violations, it made a lot of us question, okay, Hillary Clinton's campaign, they paid a law firm who then laundered the money to Fusion GPS, who then paid a foreign national, Christopher Steele, who then colluded with Russians to create this anti-Trump dossier. And yet there was never any FEC case that I'm aware of that was open. So does the law apply equally to everybody, or is it just anyone who's associated with Trump gets nailed and anybody else in high positions of authority, they get a pass?
Well, it seems so extraordinary, Congressman. I mean, everything that you've just lined up, everything we just spoke to Devin Nunes about, the fact that there was no official intelligence whatsoever used to launch an investigation into Trump, I don't understand how Robert Mueller is not looking at any of this. I mean, they authorized a raid of Michael Cohen's home, office, and hotel room, and yet no interviews, no examining what has taken place with regard to the bias at the FBI and the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Could that be possible? That Robert Mueller is just going to ignore all of this?
Yeah, I think that's what he's doing. Look, you look at who he hired. I mean, he handpicked a lot of people who could be, in the general counsel's office at the Democratic National Committee. I mean, that's just what he did. I think that was a huge mistake. I think it's hurt the credibility of his investigation. But here we are, Maria. The whole investigation on collusion was not based on intelligence. The main FISA application was based on opposition research. To this day, there's not evidence of any type of conspiracy between anyone on Trump's campaign and the Russian government. So I'm glad he brought Mayor Giuliani on, and I think we do need to negotiate an end to this. I don't think the president should fire Mueller because I think that would cause a lot of problems politically, but this needs to come to an end. It's hurting the country at this point, and let's move forward, and let's hold the people accountable throughout this whole mess who actually did violate law.
So what are you going to do? I mean, have you heard back from Jeff Sessions? I mean, how are you going to prove to the American people that, in fact, we do have a fair and just judicial system? Because right now, it looks like, it's just, it's really unfair depending on who you are, just as you just noted.
Exactly. And so ultimately, you need the Department of Justice to follow the lead of what we're laying out.
Yeah.
We're a legislative body. We don't have the authority to initiate criminal prosecutions. But I will say, McCabe has been referred not only by us, but by the IG. The IG investigation into Comey now, I think that's just the beginning. I don't think they're going to be able to say he maliciously leaked these memos, 2 of which were classified, and we're just going to let that go. I think at this point, that's going to see through, and I think that should be a criminal referral. And then you also have to do oversight over when he met with President-elect Trump about this dossier. Clapper and him had a conversation. They meet. Comey writes in his notes they need a news hook to be able to put it out. So what did Comey do? By briefing Trump, he gave CNN the news hook, and then they put it out a couple days later.
Yeah.
That whole thing stinks. He was not honest with Trump about the dossier. He didn't tell him that Hillary's campaign funded it, and he didn't go into all the other things that the dossier was alleging. He just focused on the one salacious sex thing, which is totally unsubstantiated. Man, it seems like he had it out for Donald Trump from day one.
Yeah, it really does seem that way. All right, and I wonder if Comey is going to be able to see those servers that the FBI never got to see from the DNC after
he didn't
they
have
were
much
hacked.
of an interest in getting those servers, did he, Maria? Really no interest in that. Man, they really want to get in Michael Cohen's office, but they didn't have interest in those servers.
This is so extraordinary, Congressman. Real quick before you go, North Korean leader says we no longer need nuclear and missile tests. Wow. If North Korea is giving up its nuclear capability, this is also an extraordinary move, and obviously we have to look at the president's treatment of North Korea and say what an incredible job he did, if this is true. Do you believe this?
Donald Trump has shaken this up. He has Kim Jong-un on the defensive. I think that's why you're seeing this. I still think we're a long way from actually getting there. But, man, we have a pathway now because this president is the first president in a generation to actually take this problem on head on and say, I'm not just going to put my head in the sand and let the problem get worse. So, boy, if we could get that done, that'd be one of the best achievements, I think, since Ronald Reagan helped end the Cold War.
It's absolutely incredible. So we'll be watching that. Congressman, good to see you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will see you soon, Congressman Ron DeSantis. We are remembering the life and legacy of former First Lady Barbara Bush this morning, what her son, President George W. Bush, and former First Lady Laura Bush had to say about her a day after her passing. My exclusive interview with the two of them coming next as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. Former First Lady Barbara Bush laid to rest yesterday in Texas in an emotional and poignant ceremony. Family members took turns speaking about her wit, devotion, and literacy and generosity. Earlier this week, the day after Barbara Bush passed away, I spoke with her son, President George W. Bush, and former First Lady Laura Bush about this remarkable woman. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. President, Mrs. Bush. my condolences to you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. There's a lot of condolences pouring in, and Laura and I and our entire family are very grateful for people's prayers and sympathies. It's it's the end of a beautiful life.
It was an incredible life, a life well lived, but it's never easy. I know that. And, all of the comments this morning about your mother are about how warm and wonderful and what a leader she was, but also tough as nails.
Yeah. Well, she was warm and wonderful till you got out of line. And she wasn't too warm and wonderful. No, she was awesome.
She was funny and fierce and said her mind. She was a great role model for me, for sure. I learned how to be a first lady.
I was just going to say, I was reading that when you were first lady, it was easier for you than it would have been because you had your mother-in-law.
I had my mother-in-law, and of course I'd watched her the whole time she was first lady, and when she campaigned with President Bush. So and I actually had the conversation with her early on when he first started to run that she would work on literacy. That she thought that was the most important. And if everyone could read and write, a lot of problems would be solved.
And you picked up that and kept running with it. Mm-hmm. Literacy, education for women, and did so much for women.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks.
And Mr. President, let me ask you, I know that you saw this coming. We know that Mrs. Bush said that she did not want any more medical attention and she wanted her comfort care. But were you able to say goodbye?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in person and then on the phone. Laura and I went over to see her a week ago Saturday, and we had a wonderful visit. She was strong, lucid.
Funny, still.
Funny. She and I were needling each other, and the doctor came in, and she turned to the doctor and said, "You want to know why George W. is the way he is?" And the doctor looked somewhat surprised. She said, "Because I drank and smoked when I was pregnant with him."
That's hilarious.
Yeah, no, she's funny. And I had a beautiful visit with her when it looked like, yesterday morning on the phone. And she didn't say much, but I told her I loved her. And here's the thing. She had great faith. She truly believes that there's an afterlife, that she'll be wonderfully received in the arms of a loving God, and therefore did not fear death. And as a result of her soul being comforted on the deathbed, my soul is comforted.
Wow. I love the fact that she was married to your father for 73 years.
Isn't great?
Yeah, he was by her side, by the way, when she passed.
He said that.
Which is sweet, yeah.
And we have a love letter that he wrote to her that we have been talking about this morning from World War II in 1943, penned by your father, and it's going viral this morning, obviously. And it says, it reads in part, "This may sound melodramatic, but if it does, it is only my inadequacy to say what I mean. Bar, you have made my life full of everything I could ever dream of. My complete happiness should be a token of my love for you." Were they just sort of just like a love affair all the time? I mean, in
it seemed that way, you know.
They really were.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was a great example.
So here's the thing. We've got this leadership forum here, and my mother would say, make darn sure that you participate fully in the leadership forum. And, in other words, don't sit around and feel sorry for me or yourself, more importantly.
Yeah.
But move on with life, and that's what we're doing. And we thank you for being down here, because this Bush Institute is very important to us, and we've got some programs that we think are very transformative and helpful for the future of the country.
Yeah. Why do you like painting?
It's mind expanding. It's doing something I never dreamt I would do. Tell him your line.
He was actually an art agnostic.
Really?
He never even looked at art. We lived in the White House with a really beautiful art collection. The White House has a great collection of American art, but he didn't really look at it. But now he does.
Do you also paint, Mrs. Bush?
No.
No. Okay.
And she's not a very good subject.
What? I haven't been really wild
You
about
haven't painted
any of the portraits he's done of me.
Well, I tried one, and believe me.
Well, it better be good. It better be good.
It was never good enough.
I bet. The painting we're showing some pictures right now. The painting that you did of Vladimir Putin is great.
Thank you.
I have a picture of it. And I remember the line, you looked into his eyes and saw his soul. Some people feel like if there's anybody who knows Putin the best out of everybody, it's you.
Yeah, I know him pretty well.
Are you surprised at what has taken place around
Well, what
Russia?
happened was when I looked in his eyes and saw his soul, Russia was broke. I mean, short-term broke. And price of oil goes up and Putin changed. And look, he's a very smart tactician. The problem is his whole attitude on most issues is I'm going to win and the U.S. is going to lose. And so I'm not very surprised. I mean, he is a very aggressive person who wants to reinstate Soviet influence, even though the Soviet no longer exists. And therefore, I always felt it was very important for the United States to be very forceful in dealing with Putin. Not belligerent, but forceful.
Mr. President, let me ask you a little about the news, because, of course, last week we saw President Trump pardon Scooter Libby.
Yeah, good.
Your reaction?
My reaction is I'm happy for Scooter and his family.
Did you see the Wall Street Journal headline saying Scooter Libby was the soldier left on the battlefield?
No, I didn't see that. But, you know, I'm sure he's got some friends in the editorial board there. And, you know, as I said, I'm happy for his family and for Scooter.
Mrs. Bush, you remain one of the most popular and loved first ladies of all time.
All right.
And you have your own incredible leadership style. Do you want to pass on any words of advice to our current First Lady, Melania Trump?
Well, no, I wouldn't give her advice, but I've met Melania. She invited me to tea at the White House, and she's a beautiful woman and a very, very lovely.
So are you, honey.
Oh, thank you, darling. And I think she will do really very well.
My thanks to President Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush, and my thanks to the George W. Bush Presidential Center. We will take a break. When we come back, does the DNC lawsuit against Russia, WikiLeaks, and the Trump campaign have any merit? We're debating that with our panel. We're looking ahead on Sunday Morning Futures right now with the panel on deck. At Democrats after the DNC filed a lawsuit against the Trump campaign, WikiLeaks, and Russia for election meddling. The president pointing fingers at former DNC chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz for refusing to give the FBI access to computer servers that the DNC says were hacked in 2016 to spread stolen information and smear the Clinton campaign. But let's bring in our panel on that. Ed Rollins is a Republican campaign advisor and former campaign manager for the Reagan-Bush ticket in 1984. He's a Fox News contributor. Christopher Bedford with us this morning, editor-in-chief at the Daily Caller and author of The Art of the Donald. Good to see you both.
Morning.
Your thoughts on this lawsuit?
I thought it's one of the stupidest things the Democrats have done. They're going to open up a can of worms that they don't want to have opened up. This guy was on the Hill in the land of the blind. The one-eyed man is king. He and his whole family had total access to all the Democrats' information on the Hill, all the information that Debbie Wasserman had at the DNC, and I think you're going to find it was a real source of the leaks.
Well, this is the Awan brothers, and you've done so much reporting, great reporting on this at the Daily Caller, Christopher, so thank you for that. Where does this? Why aren't we hearing about this anymore? This guy was making $165,000 a year, one of the higher paid. All his brothers and his wife were making high salaries as well. And you don't hear what happened. What do you have for us?
Well, it's a complicated story. It's a difficult story. You're one of the few places that have really been following it carefully, and there's a lot of shade. There's a lot of mystery around it. Just like the president tweeted last week, who is this mystery man from Pakistan? We know that the IG has said he had the keys to the kingdom. We know that he traveled in Pakistan with an actual armed escort. We know that he claimed to have the power to change the president, and we know that he claimed that, of course. And we know that Debbie Wasserman Schultz is terrified of something that he has. She's been tying up a laptop that has her username that he had a password to for months in legal limbo. And the Republicans have been really hesitant to go after this. The president last week gave them a push to say, figure this out.
I don't understand why the Republicans are so hesitant.
I don't either, because it's nothing that we did. It's theirs. And this guy had access to everything. And he'd been fired by a couple of members of Congress for misbehavior. He put his whole family in there. And again, as I say, they understood the system, where most members of Congress have no clue what's on their system. And I'm sure every single thing that they wanted, they got, and everything the Pakistanis wanted. It's probably the most unsafe country in the world, who basically wanted our intelligence, and I'm sure they got it through here and through the DNC.
Well, they arrested him while he was fleeing the country.
For bank fraud. That's what they're holding him on. It seems like it's just a bookmark here. There's definitely something beyond bank fraud that the FBI is interested in, but they're not doing the interviews. They're not executing the search warrants. For example, after the Democratic caucus's server was hacked or it was leaked, this is a piece of evidence. It physically disappeared. It was removed, and somebody basically stole it. No search warrant was ever executed on that. And this is what the Republicans have been doing. This is what Speaker Ryan's been doing. He says, hey, guys, this is just a theft investigation. It's way bigger than a theft investigation. He has, Imran Awan had the access to the very intimate emails and communications of almost the entire Democratic caucus, and he appears to be a bad player.
There was also some speculation that it could have been ties to terrorist groups, Muslim Brotherhood, not bank fraud. You say that this is just a marker.
I'm saying he's a mystery man, and clearly the sponsors here were the Pakistani government. And I think to a certain extent, he and his family had been fired, had maintained access till February after Trump had been inaugurated. I'm sure they have every single thing that they could possibly want to get, secret documents, DNC documents, what have you. And I think it's a scandal of major, major consequence.
I think you're right, because I just don't understand why when the DNC got hacked, Christopher, they wouldn't want the FBI to investigate it. Show the servers to the U.S. government so that the U.S. government can investigate this. No, they hired a private company to actually investigate and look at those servers.
This was about Bernie Sanders. I think that they basically tipped the scale against Bernie Sanders, and I think they were afraid of what they would find relative to Bernie Sanders' internal Democratic politics as opposed to national security.
So is it likely that we're going to be hearing a lot more about this if the Democrats push on this lawsuit?
They might have just made a serious error here because, just as you said, they didn't want the FBI involved. They didn't want the government looking into these servers. There was a lot of shady business. Debbie Wasserman Schultz had to step down after that was exposed. They said it was because the election was too important. That's why they didn't want to give access. That's obviously ridiculous. It's not true. And now, if they push on this and the president gets to do discovery and return on them, we're going to learn a whole lot more.
It's incredible. Real quick on the Pompeo hearing tomorrow. Your thoughts on the vote?
I think they're not. I think he's not going to make it through the committee, but I think they certainly could do everything they can to get him out and get him the 50 votes.
But you don't think he'll?
I don't think they're going to get him out of the committee.
All right, we will leave it there. Ed Rollins, Christopher Bedford, great to see you both.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
Thank you so much for joining us. A lot going on, man. It is incredible. That'll do it for us, Sunday Morning Futures. Thanks for joining me. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Join me tomorrow morning, first thing, Mornings with Maria, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern on the Fox Business Network. Stay with Fox News right now. Media Buzz with Howie Kurtz is up next after this short break. Have a great Sunday, everybody.